Good evening and welcome to Latino Public Radio. My name is Pat Ford. I serve as General Manager for an organization called the Coalition Radio Network. I'll be your host tonight for what will become the Rhode Island Democratic General Treasurer's Candidates Debate. Joining us tonight, Mayor James Diossa. In his recent political past, helped lead a remarkable resurgence for Central Falls out of bankruptcy into what is rapidly becoming one of Rhode Island's great success stories. Stefan Pryor, who took the Commerce Corporation and helped create an economic center to become a force in economic development in the state of Rhode Island. Gentlemen, welcome to the show tonight.
Good to be with you, Pat.
We'll be alternating between three questions each candidate, each campaign supported. And we're going to generally limit about the responses to about 30 seconds to a minute. And at that point, we'll go into some questions that I've conjured up. From the prior campaign, Mr. Diossa, we'll ask you to go first.
Yes.
The cost of education can be staggering. As General Treasurer, how would you help Rhode Islanders save for college?
Look, this is a unique opportunity for the Treasurer, who has done a great job in the past by involving the 529 plan of getting young kids enrolled into this program. And this has been a true success story. You know, I want to continue building on the 529 plan to have kids save up for college. But more than that, I want to look at policy to see if we can open it up for a kid who doesn't go to college, maybe go to a trade school and they learn a different trade so that they can be successful.
Mr. Pryor.
I think that it's very important that we help Rhode Island families save for college and for job training, stackable credentials, and career choices for our young people. The 529 plan of the state is a great start, and the kind of deferred taxation that program offers is advantageous for the purpose of saving for college, etc. I'd like to see us go further. I'd like to see us provide new savings opportunities and wealth building opportunities for families. So, for example, there are some states that have started to introduce what they call baby bonds. A small handful of states, and some legislation has been introduced on the federal level, including one of my mentors, Senator Cory Booker, has introduced this legislation. And it would enable early in a child's life, even at birth, providing modest deposits in an account that serve as matching deposits, especially for lower income families and middle income families. So you start very early in a child's life, and by the time the youngster is actually ready for college or for job training, there's a pocket of wealth that's available. Another idea, and we can get into this more, Pat, is helping to work with the banking system and credit unions of our state to open up the system for savings accounts and checking accounts. Too often, there are minimum balance requirements that zap a family, middle income, low income family, with fines and fees. And I'd like to see greater entry for middle income and lower income families to the banking system.
And that brings up an important point. There's a double whammy, for lack of a better term, in Rhode Island. You have a significant portion of Rhode Island that is considered unbanked. In addition to that, with interest rates rising, now you're going to see the trigger effect, not just in the mortgage market, but in the educational loan market, of what could potentially be some fairly exorbitant rates. Do you see a role, a la, say, the infrastructure bank, where the student loan authority becomes more aggressive in subsidizing rates? Is that important to you?
Absolutely. And by the way, I enrolled my daughter at birth in the 529 plan, so that program has expanded very good under this current treasurer, Seth Magaziner. To your point, the student loan authority, the Rhode Island Student Loan Authority, can be more aggressive. I, being the treasurer, would be very active. One of the things that we want to push forward is there's a real shortage in police officers, health care service, teachers, and our policy will look at trying to see if we can recruit more people into these fields, and if they graduate from a high school in Rhode Island and go to college in Rhode Island and go into this field, potentially looking at waiving those loans in 5 years of service. So we have to be more creative because there's a real shortage. I'm concerned about it. I have a daughter now that's going to be 3. I want to make sure that there's enough teachers in the school system, enough police officers in our communities, And so that's how I would be very active with the Rhode Island Student Loan Authority.
Secretary Pryor, let's talk about student loans for a moment. You know, I've reviewed some of the tapes and looked at some of your earlier debates this afternoon, and there is a move afoot by a large number of people, a significant economic force as well as a social force, to effectively allow students to walk away from student loans. I know, and is it fair to say you're both in support of that?
Correct.
The problem there, though, is...
I'd want to say more about walk away from, but please go ahead.
But fair enough, and I'll give you both the opportunity to kind of combine those thoughts. But ultimately, are you really allowing people to walk away, or are you simply, in the case of the equity, transferring it onto the taxpayer? Secretary Pryor.
Well, I think that student loans are too burdensome, and especially for lower income and middle income families, they're too burdensome. So I do think we have to do something about it, and we should do it in a way that's strategic and makes sense as an investment for our state. So I'll give you an example of something that we should build upon. Across the past two governors who I've had the honor of serving, Governor Raimondo and Governor McKee, we created something called the Wavemaker Fellowship in concert with the General Assembly. And the Wavemaker Fellowship offers partial repayment of a student loan in certain fields, the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, for Rhode Islanders who go into those fields, also for the design field, because Rhode Island excels at design. I have participated in proposing the extension of that program to teachers, because we need more teachers in our classrooms, and increasingly there are concerns about a shortage of teachers, and healthcare workers.
Right.
So I think where there are shortages in our community, and where we can afford to make investments, and where it will make a significant difference for lower income and middle income families, I'm for making those repayments. That's different from walking away from loans, breaking a contract or something to that effect, but I do think we should help people who are doing their very best to pay their loans, and who we need to see in certain fields get into those fields and serve Rhode Island.
Mayor Diossa, I want to give you...
No, absolutely. Look, Governor McKee, who supports me in my treasurer's race, him and I have talked about, the impediment of this population who is burdened by student loans, who can't afford to buy a home, who can't afford to make any type of investments. And so we believe in the same thing, that we have to address this. I know that the current President Biden, is looking at it at a national level, but we need to focus it here in Rhode Island, so that, again, we want more teachers, more police officers, more healthcare workers going into these fields, because I believe if we don't do anything about it right now, we're going to go into a big crisis, just like the crisis we have now around housing.
In fact, that segues into our next area. Both of you submitted questions on housing, so we're kind of loosely buying them. I'd ask you, Mayor Diossa, I want to give you an opportunity to respond first. The General Treasurer serves on the board of Rhode Island Housing. With housing prices continue to squeeze families across the street, how will you use the office of Treasurer, all right? And again, getting back to rising interest rates, are you concerned about adjustable rate mortgages and their impact, particularly on a community like Rhode Island that's been so challenged post-pandemic?
Look, we've seen how grossly the impact of housing shortages or housing affordability has been, especially during the pandemic. I really applaud this governor, Dan McKee. It took him, this new speaker, Chikachi, and Senate President Ruggiero to come in together, create a real big package of investment for housing, and try to move this ball along, even creating a czar for housing, which I think is one of the best things that's happened, so that there's a focus on it. And I would use my voice at the Rhode Island Housing Authority to continue building on the type of policy, trying to get all the 39 cities and towns to build more affordable housing, and fast. And that's what we need right now. We need to build fast and get the money into the hands of people who are building these homes.
A second part of the question that the Diossa campaign asked to direct to you, Secretary Pryor, was, and I'll quote, as Commerce Secretary, many have criticized that you added an extra layer of bureaucracy that added to the problem. I'm not going to go down the road of the pejorative, but maybe you could address the relationship between Commerce, Rhode Island Housing, in addressing the RA rent relief programming, supplementing that in terms of action forces on the ground after that became troubled. Maybe you can just go there for a little bit.
Sure, no problem. I'm proud to have been a co-author of the proposal to provide $250 million of our American Rescue Plan dollars as a state, the federal dollars, to provide that for affordable housing, working across 2 governors for that purpose. I'm very proud to have been a major part of proposing and championing that. That's a significant federal investment that will go into the production and preservation of affordable housing. It's important that we do both, by the way. We need to generate new units, construct them, Pat, and we also need to preserve those units that exist, because very often they'll otherwise go full market, and then they'll drive out the lower income and middle income Rhode Islanders who would want to live there. On the question of the leadership for housing, Mayor Diossa just cited this actually. It's been lauded across the state. I was among those first to propose that there be a point person for housing who would actually be at the highest levels of the government and have helped to recruit that person who was a deputy secretary and became secretary to finally oversee, not with bureaucracy, Pat, but really with a relatively thin office, oversee the multiplicity of agencies that pre-exist us and work in housing. So Rhode Island Housing, there's the Office of Housing and Community Development, and there are other offices within the state on the Health and Human Services side that provide wraparound services to families. I think there was a near consensus, executive branch, legislative branch, that there needed to be a coordinator for all of that work. And one last thing, we can't just depend upon federal funding during the COVID era to solve our affordable housing problem. So I was also a co-proposer and co-author of the first in memory, maybe first ever, reliable recurring funding stream for affordable housing, and that's an increment on the realty transfer tax. So when real estate is sold, that's now going to go to the production of affordable housing. At some point, in the near term, it'll be about $8 million a year that it generates. Not enough to fully populate the funds that we need for affordable housing, but a good start to have baked into our budget a real commitment to affordable housing.
Fair enough. Both of you have given ample time during the forums and debates that you participated in about the general condition of the state pension system. And so it's fairly well-traveled territory. To both your credit, you've been right on the ball in terms of addressing those issues. But let's talk about local pensions. One of the responsibilities of the State Treasurer's Office is to do an annual assessment, an annual report of what's happening in, well, as we all know with Governor McKee, the 39 cities and towns, right? We all know. Every child in Rhode Island now knows that there's 39 cities and towns. But do you see any role whatsoever, particularly with the type of market turbulence that we've seen in the last year? And we all know, as investment professionals, there's a lag period, so where you'll see that impact portfolios. Do you see any role in the state whatsoever in the more troubled pension systems beyond Providence, other communities?
I do.
Let's let the mayor go first.
Look, I know firsthand what it was to deal with a pension that was devastated by bankruptcy, who cut retirees 50% of their retiree benefits, and I witnessed firsthand, grown men and women who have served the city lose 50% of their pension because the bankruptcy court decided to cut it 50%. I was able to work with the legislature to bring it up to 75% and essentially move our pension into the state MERS, because I felt it was important that our pension be not only pooled but managed by experts. And also we know that long term this would be the best thing for our retirees, our members, city, and the taxpayers of Central Falls. So I would take a very active role with municipalities, like you said, 39 cities and towns, where I would create a go team that would help assist cities and towns with any issues, questions, support on their pensions. And just like Central Falls did, just like West Warwick did, if there's an opportunity and a pathway where the unions, the council, and the leadership can get together and want to move the system into the MERS system, I would welcome that as well. And I think that that's an opportunity for the treasurer to assist cities and towns across the state.
Secretary Pryor.
I think it's very important that the Treasurer's Office work in partnership with cities and towns for the purpose of ensuring that their pension funds are at the healthiest possible level and are operating optimally. I'll say this. I do think it has to be done in a variety of ways, meaning that we shouldn't specifically jump to any one solution for a given city or town. It should be based upon the precise conditions of the given municipal pension system. There may be conditions under which advising is the best way to go about helping that city or town, and let that city or town really control its own destiny. One of the things that I've been talking about throughout my campaign is creating a formal unit within the Treasury that would offer technical assistance, the best advice we can, including best practices from other states, cities within Rhode Island, cities outside of our state, as to how to get us a pension fund on track, including what kinds of professional services. Can they borrow expertise from the Treasury without actually migrating their system into the state system? We do need to be careful before we fully transfer a municipal system to the state system. It could destabilize it, so we need to have a variety of options available. And frankly, for a system ever to enter, a municipal system, ever to enter the state structure, we need to set criteria where that fund is sufficiently on its way to health, way to good health, so that based upon those criteria, it makes sense to meld into the state structure. So those are just a couple of the steps that I would take.
The Diossa campaign took the opportunity in their 3 selected questions, and I've merged a couple of the questions because there was overlap, but to ask sort of I'll call it a pointed political question. Not so much a gotcha, but a pointed political question. So I'm going to go to you, Secretary Pryor, first. You did not submit one, so I'm going to give you the opportunity, if you choose to ask a pointed political question to Mayor Diossa. From the Diossa campaign, the Mayor Diossa put in a public records request for the details about your management of the failed tourism campaign, Cooler and Warmer, where you had admitted in 2016 to the then State Finance Committee that you didn't listen enough to tourism bureaus around Rhode Island. Why did you choose to redact hundreds of pages instead of being honest about your role in, their words, this national embarrassment?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of assumptions in the question. I didn't choose to redact anything at all. As a matter of fact, I don't even know the status of the request that you're citing. I don't know if it's I don't know if it's a current live request or what the status is.
It was a lot.
Well, that means that you have information that I don't. You must have been interacting with my successors.
No.
So my successors must have turned something over that I'm not aware of. I'm actually just not sure, or if it was picked up sooner, I'm not familiar. But what I can express is that there are rules by which information is provided to the public. What I will say is Rhode Islanders should know that tourism efforts of the state have been lifted up by the efforts of the past 2 governors, and I've been proud to work with them. As a matter of fact, even during the COVID pandemic, when families were looking for safe vacations and local vacations, out in the open, take it outside, if you will, there were efforts to do that, and some of those were very successful. So I think we shouldn't dwell upon mistakes. Sometimes there are errors that are made. What we should focus upon is how do we move forward as a state, and what's been terrific is that we've had professionals working on tourism in our state at the regional level and at the state level who've managed to advance our efforts. And visitation in Rhode Island has been at very strong levels, even record levels in some instances. And we've begun to invite people into events that they've not seen before, activities that they've not seen before. So proud to see that Rhode Island, the ocean state, is continuing and even strengthening its image and continuing to attract tourists.
Right. Now, in the interest of some fairness here, you chose with your questions to ask more broad-based policy questions.
I did. I didn't ask anything that was specific to any candidate.
Is there anything that?
And that was what I understood to be the ground rules. It was to be both candidates.
No, fair enough. So I'm going to give you the opportunity. Is there anything, I'll say, pointed that you'd like to ask Mayor Diossa?
There have been some questions raised about the fact that in 2018 there was a property tax increase that occurred in Central Falls, and it has been a little bit unclear what has occurred, but there was a property tax increase that was reported by the Boston Globe, where Central Falls enacted a property tax increase that was more than double the capped amount, 4% that's permitted
Right.
under state statute. And apparently it's also been disclosed that the then mayor proposed a tax increase that was actually 3 times the level, and it was brought down to that lower level, but it was violative of the state cap. And I believe that the taxpayers had to get a refund because it was in fact not in accordance with the law or unlawful that there was that tax increase. I guess what I would say is to the former mayor, how do you think that such an unlawful tax increase, a miscalculation, such a blunder qualifies you to be treasurer?
There it
Look,
is.
being the chief executive, you have to manage people, and we're proud of the work we did in Central Falls for 8 years. Quoted by Moody's saying that we were the quickest, fastest turnaround for a bankruptcy. When I took over, the bond status was at junk. When I left, it was an investment grade. There was an oversight in the finance director, in her department. We corrected it. It didn't cost taxpayers anything, but Cool and Warmer cost taxpayers a lot of money, thousands of dollars. That's the difference. We managed it, we corrected it, we solved it. It didn't cost anyone, any taxpayer, any dollars. We responded correctly and adequately, but Cool and Warmer, on the other hand, cost thousands and thousands and thousands of taxpayers.
I just have to point out
that is a fair and fine difference between what happened.
I'll tell you, the fair and fine difference that I have to note is that what I'm referring to is an actual miscalculation as pertains to financial matters at the municipal level. Mayor Diossa is running on his track record to become the chief finance official of the state. So the idea of doing an actually illegal tax increase, I don't see how that qualifies someone to be treasurer. I think that's a major financial blunder, to be polite. So I do want to point that out.
Fair enough. Both of you have gone on the record, and please feel free to correct me, that you would like to aggressively, potentially ahead of schedule, address the COLAs in terms of state and former and retired state employees. There is a different school of thought, and I was just wondering if you could compare and contrast briefly the notion that that money, instead of redirecting it towards early, if you will, upgrading of these COLAs, would instead be directed towards is arguably one of the higher per capita debt ratios in the country by a state, and or using it to engage in, well, just say a reduction of a burdensome tax, if you set a tax laws on small business. Mayor Diossa, why don't you go ahead?
Look, we know that the average person in Rhode Island is feeling squeezed, they're hurt. I met 2 retirees who were former school employees who are retired, of age, who are now on food stamps. I heard for these people because these are my neighbors. These are the average Rhode Islanders that served our state, and I hate to see this unfortunate circumstances impact them. Look, my whole plan has been very clear. I want to stay on the course of being a very fiduciary responsible with the pension fund, continuing the back to the basics, which I'll call maintain the basics, that was started by Seth Magaziner, who's done an incredible job. And what I proposed is, I don't want to get there faster, because getting there faster means involving more risk. And that's a very big concern for retirees. What I've said is we want to stay the course, and in the meantime, in my first year, I would propose going to the legislature and talking to the governor about creating a stipend for the current retirees who are hurting, who should not be on food stamps. Again, these are people who served our state honorably, and that's my position with the pension fund.
Secretary Pryor.
I see what you're getting at with your question, Pat, which is a question. What you're saying is, if there is financial opportunity, should we offer advantages to our retirees, or should we offer advantages throughout our tax structure or other such measure for all Rhode Islanders? And my answer would be we should consider both. And first, let me address the pension system. I do think it is very important that we work to strengthen the pension system. We need someone who's managed billions of dollars of public investments. I have. We need someone in charge of the pension fund who's going to mind the store, who's going to be actively focused on working on the growth of that fund. Now, the growth of that fund can occur in a variety of ways. One of the ways is that we can analyze very carefully the subcomponents of the fund, the various fund managers who've been chosen over time, and with credit to previous treasurers, we've seen some healthy fund growth. How do we ensure that it's even healthier as we go, which is the goal of treasurers past and would be my goal, by looking up and down, back and forth, and looking at any of the underperforming components, any of the underperforming fund managers. And I would want to reference within our portfolio who's doing best, who's doing worst. If you're doing worst, why are you still managing our money? But also reference points beyond Rhode Island's fund to other state pension funds, endowment funds, and other comparable funds to see if our fund managers are reaching the goals that we should be setting and reaching these reasonable benchmarks. So we would work to replace, to enhance, to adjust, to increase the growth of our fund, which could result in the restoration of benefits. So that would be that piece. But I will note, if there are budget surpluses, and there could be, even under the tumultuous economic conditions, it's possible that there will be predictions of, and in reality, budget surpluses going forward. We certainly had some in the last budget cycle. If there are, I would like to see us consider whether any amount should be dedicated to our retirees, but I would also like to see reasonable and well-considered tax relief. And among the options I'd like to look at with the governor, with the General Assembly, is sales tax relief to make Rhode Island competitive with Connecticut and Massachusetts. We have currently a higher rate than they do. In the midst of inflation, that's not smart, but I'd like to look at whether a measure of relief is possible there. And another one I want to point out, and we should compare these.
We're running a little
We should
low on
compare
time.
these, and I'll quickly state it, is the tangible property tax for small businesses, which is the tax on equipment and furniture, even after that small business, that store or shop or restaurant, has paid sales tax on a piece of furniture or a piece of equipment. You have to, on a continuous basis, pay tangible taxes. I think most business owners, small business owners would agree with me. We need to offer some relief there. So we need to look at the tax picture, Pat, and yes, consider possibilities for the investment of a surplus for those purposes.
Yeah, I think, look, my opponent doesn't really understand the office well. He's trying to create another commerce department here at the treasurer's office, and that's a real concern. I don't know why
That's
he's
ridiculous.
suggesting to lower the tax, the sales tax, when he could have done that in his 7 years as the state commerce director, or
We did
address
succeed
the
in
issue,
advocating tax
address
relief
the issue
and
of the tangible
enacting.
tax, and he didn't as commerce secretary. Again,
did enact
we
a
need to
preliminary
focus
measure.
on,
Understood.
we need to focus
We've got-
on the pensions and the programs in the treasurer's office and do what's right for Rhode Island taxpayers. That's the most important thing.
What
And
the-
people who are hurting.
What the
every
treasurer
single
should do is promote a healthy dialogue
I let him
about
speak.
the measures.
I let him speak.
Well,
I let him
we
speak.
each spoke.
I let
I'm
him
gonna, we've
speak.
got just
We
2
each
minutes
spoke.
left, so I'm going to interrupt both
Yes.
of you. Okay, because I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask one last question. To me, philosophically, is perhaps the most important question of the evening, and kind of each, if we could take a minute each, also wind that into your closing statement. Rhode Island is a mosaic. It's an astonishing melting pot. I had a conversation with Angelica Infante Green, who pointed out to me that the number of languages spoken in Providence schools is roughly twice that of New York City. Think about that for a moment. And our strength comes from all this different variety of economic input. But at the same time, there are tensions, and and so from the treasurer's perspective, what do you see, or what would you engage in to work together to bring those communities in terms of investment, infrastructure bank, and then maybe just give us a couple of quick comments in closing about your candidacy. Go ahead first.
Thank you, Pat. No, look, I
Got a minute.
I was born and raised in Rhode Island. I went to public school systems in Central Falls. Was the first one to graduate college, come back, become the first Latino mayor of Central Falls, which is another melting pot. Look, there's a lot of things that the treasurer's office can do to, bring these communities and get them more involved. That's part of my strategy if I become treasurer, is to bring the office to all 39 cities and towns, hire diverse staff, be able to communicate with the folks in these communities. I think where we can make a big difference is not only the 529 plan, but also school construction. You know, education is the biggest reason why a lot of families migrate to the United States, and I want to make sure they have the best of the best school infrastructure so that teachers are teaching in the best environments and the kids are learning in our schools. And so that's the way I think will make a big difference. And again, the housing is important too, and I'll be a strong advocate so that we continue building affordable housing so that our families who are coming to Rhode Island, who love Rhode Island, can stay and live and grow old here.
Thank you. Secretary Pryor.
I think it's very important that the treasurer ensure that there's prosperity in Rhode Island, but that it is shared, that it is inclusive, that it's across all communities, that neighborhoods and communities that may be coming from behind get really a prioritization so that they can get even more of a boost. And I'll give a couple of examples. I do think that the treasurer's office, following the precedent of Treasurer Magaziner, who started with the deposits that the Treasury offers to banks and other lenders in Rhode Island to incentivize loans to small businesses, I think we can take that to the next level. I think that we can offer loan capital, not from the pension fund, separate loan capital that we accumulate through professional lenders to small businesses, including minority-owned businesses, Latino-owned businesses, Black-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, businesses that don't often have access to capital going into the process, but need that leg up to get the financing that will help them
That already happens through the
to
bank
succeed
local
and
program.
to survive and to succeed. And I'll note also that one of the things that I helped to create across agencies and out into the institutions and businesses of Rhode Island is called Supply RI, where we helped minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses and small businesses access procurements, public and private, in large institutions. Some of the companies that are right here in Rhode Island, not just universities and hospitals, but also companies, to help all communities benefit when companies are growing, even when smaller businesses are growing, they can connect with other small businesses. That's the kind of ecosystem that the treasurer can help to create, building upon the precedent of previous treasurers and doing so professionally, and I honestly think inspiring more activity in the private market. And as treasurer, that's what I'll do. So I hope to have your support.
Gentlemen, thanks to both of you. I think we could probably go for another half hour or so.
Yeah.
And I just want to point out that the stadium word was never mentioned once. Yeah. So thanks to both of you.
Thank you, Pat.
A big thank you personally to Latino Public Radio for giving me the opportunity to
very
work with
much.
you gentlemen tonight.
Ray and all of Latino Public Radio.
Absolutely. It's a wonderful forum that I've gotten to know.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Likewise.
Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Gracias.
Thanks.
Muchas gracias a Latino Public Radio.
Thanks to all of you for listening tonight. Stay engaged. Please vote, whether it be on the primary or in the general election. This is your opportunity. We're at an amazing moment in Rhode Island.
It is very important.
Good night.
Good night.